fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren. Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Today we have a great writer, a writer that everyone knows his name. And we're going to talk about his last book. We're going to talk about his whole career. So welcome to the show, Lev Raphael.
It's great to be talking to you, and I hope things are, the weather's good in Seattle.
You know, it's been sunny and rainy, sort of mixed.
Well, that's good because you need the rain, and it's been sunny and rainy here, so we have the same weather. Yeah,
no complaints. No complaints.
Nope.
And
nope.
Well, here we are. So, you've got quite the writing history. So you always wanted to be a writer. You're one of those guys that, since you can remember, probably you've been a writer.
Yeah, second grade. I was in love with storytelling in second grade. I was read to by my mother. I loved story time in school and at the library. And I also was a very early reader. I read above my grade, and I think in second grade I started reading I, Robot.
Oh.
I didn't understand all of it, but I started reading it because my brother was a science fiction fan, so he was 5 years older than me. So he was bringing, so he brought all these books back from the library, and I would just look at his books, and I fell in love with a narrative of all kinds, but mostly science fiction when I was young, and also adventure stories like The Three Musketeers. And that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do with my life. That and teach, because I came from a family of teachers, and so I've gotten to do both those things. So, I'm not going to be one of those people on his deathbed who said, if only I'd done X, Y, or Z. I've done it. I've done what I wanted to do. I haven't had an unlived life.
Well, that's a good thing. That's a real good thing to be able to say. Do you have a favorite type of writing, as in genre, or do you have sort of a all around, like as in reading and writing yourself?
Well, reading and writing are different. I've published in about a dozen different genres, everything from memoir to literary fiction to mystery to a vampire novella to psychology, and mostly now I read history and biography, but with a proviso. I mean, the writing has to be really, really good. The writing has to be the quality of a novel, and the storytelling has to be as good as a novel. So I have to feel totally captured by the voice of the biographer or the historian, whoever she or he or they are, and I just need to be pulled in by the narrative. So because I'm always stimulated by really good writing of whatever genre. I used to read more fiction, I think, than I do now. I haven't found that many contemporary writers that I enjoy reading as much as older writers. But there's just so much good writing of all kinds out there, and people are always recommending books to me, and that I just stumble on. And I'm always surprised. And I'm always learning. Two of the writers that I've gotten to know in the last few years that I hadn't known of before, Bernard Cornwell, who has that amazing Anglo-Saxon series that has been turned into a TV series, The Last Kingdom, and C.S. Harris, who writes Regency mysteries and both of them are really superb at writing, at creating a scene and taking you into it in terms of all the sense details. And I tend to be really visual, so I'm drawn to writers who appeal to more than the visual, and they do that. I've also fallen in love with Martin Cruz Smith and his Arkady Renko series, and I've read all the books twice. And I'll probably read them a third time because I love the cynicism of his Soviet cop and the take on the Soviet Union as it collapses and becomes this oligarchy and giant crime syndicate. But they're all three of them are really fine writers. And
what do you consider good writing? But what is it? Is it the story? Is it the wordsmith? What part of the book or novel is the thing that captures you?
It's all of it. It's both of it. I mean, there's certain people who I can't read because the prose is just too bland. It's not that I like ornate or baroque prose. It's that the writing just has to be evocative of whatever the scene is, and that could be any kind of style, in any kind of voice, in any kind of person, third person, first person, second person, direct address, whatever, it doesn't matter. The writing carries the story. I mean, I know there are people who say, well, I don't care about the writing as long as it's got a good plot, and that's fine. That plot isn't enough for me, and so I admire mystery, for instance, crime writers who both write beautifully and also tell a great story. I mean, Walter Mosley is one of them. I mean, I think he's amazing in book after book after book. Laurie Rader Day, I think she's fantastic. I just love diving into her work. Ken Follett, I mean, he's somebody I fell in love with a long time ago. And then someone completely different, Janet Ivanovich's early books were hilarious. I love the writing, I love the voice, and I love the storytelling. So for me, the two are interlocked. And when I used to review very heavily for the Detroit Free Press and the Washington Post and a couple of other newspapers, and then also for radio stations, and I also had my own radio show. And I couldn't do a book, talk about a book, unless it appealed to me at both those levels, the level of the story and the level of the writing. And that's subjective because people will, I'll point something out and I say, I think this is really beautifully written, and some say, oh, it's so bland. Or I'll say, I think this is really beautifully written, and someone will say, I can't even get through a sentence of it. It's too dense for me. So, that's very subjective. And I was aware of that as a reviewer, that, I was just one opinion. And also, one opinion on one day. I mean, there were days that I was in a foul mood and, I might not have reviewed a book as well as I might have on a day when I was in a better mood. That's the luck of the draw. That's another thing that's really hard for writers to deal with is that, reviews are personal opinions, and those persons might be having a really bad time and might just read your book at the wrong time in their reviewing cycle. So maybe they've read too many amateur mysteries, and then they have to review yours, and it's an amateur mystery, and they think, oh, give me a break, another one? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to roll with that.
So, Lev, in your own writing, how do you balance those different parts? Because you can only invest so much time and so many words into each element, right? Like, how do you balance that in your own work?
I published my first short story in 1978, and it's really become organic for me. It's hard to explain it beyond that. I did an MFA in creative writing, which helped me not so much not because of the professors I worked with, but because I was in basically a giant writers group for 2.5 years. I mean, people who were passionate about poetry and fiction and drama and read to each other and recommended books, and also we read a lot of we had a lot of classwork. I had 30 credits of literature, and I read a lot of really amazing novels that I might not have read otherwise. I don't think I would have read Joseph Conrad, honestly, if I hadn't had him assigned to me. And then a lot of contemporary British writers at the time, like Muriel Spark, who was hilarious in a dry English way, and so Anita Bruckner. These were so I had that basic training. I read voraciously. I mean, my college mentor said, if you want to be a writer, read everything. I said, what do you mean? She said, just read everything. So I kind of tried to read everything. And so for me, I don't find, each book has its own voice, right? My Nick Hoffman mystery series has a specific voice. It's the voice of a put-upon English professor who watches corrupt and stupid people around him take advantage of others, and he's not a superhero, but in effect he is fighting for justice in his small way. That's in first person. That's a very specific voice. The vampire novel I wrote, the novella, The Vampire of Gotham, that's written in a period voice because I studied a lot of Gilded Age fiction. It's set in New York City in about 1910, 1915, and it's about a Jewish vampire, and it's also erotic, and so that voice was very different from other books that I've written. Each book I find how it has to be written, both in story and in voice. One of them, unfortunately, took me 20 years. And I never want that to happen again. So that's my novel, The German Money, and which got a rave review in the Washington Post. So I guess it was worth it. They compared me to Philip Roth and John le Carré and Kafka. I mean, what a trio, right? And it blew my mind with the review.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe it was worth 20 years of work to get a review like that, because when do you get something like that? But each book is different, and each book has its challenges. Each book has its joys. You can't predict. So the balance grows out of the work itself. At least that's how I found it. I've published 26 books now, so it's I've been at it a long time.
Do you think the quality of writing has gone down, or the quality of grammar, especially in, let's say, mainstream America?
Well, I think. Well, yeah. Okay. So I'm a few years away from a 6-year stint teaching creative writing and other courses at Michigan State University. So, based on the writing of some of my students, or a lot of them, yeah, I'd say that's gone down. But there are a lot of complicated reasons for that. I mean, part of it is that grammar isn't taught the way it used to be. I mean, that's one thing. But I think also people write like what they read online. And what we read online a lot of it tends to be pretty informal. And certainly there are, spell check is evil, because it just doesn't. Spell checking doesn't catch a lot of things that are wrong, and also continually suggests things that are wrong, and I think people rely on it. I think I see this all the time, even in the New York Times and the Washington Post. People have clearly not read their own work by themselves. They've run it through spell checking, and it missed a lot of things. It missed, grammatical errors and spelling errors, homonyms like IT apostrophe S and ITS. I mean, the contraction versus the possessive. I'll tell you something, after 6 years of teaching, it kind of messed up my own writing, because sometimes I'll be typing an email and I'll look at that and I think that word is spelled wrong, because I've been looking at that word spelled wrong for so many years.
Yeah.
So in some ways I think generally, yeah, maybe the quality of general writing has gone down, but I think there are amazing writers out there, so I think that hasn't deteriorated at all. I mean, there are wonderful writers like Val McDermott. I mean, people are producing fantastic crime fiction all over the place, in different languages. And I think there's some really good translators out there too, because one of the things I like to read works in translation, and there are people who do translating, and you read the book and you don't realize it was not written in English. I mean, like Headhunters by Joe Nesbo. I've read that 3 times. That book is amazing. It does not sound as if it was written in Norwegian. It really doesn't. You don't get that feel that it's been translated and there's some awkwardness there. It just is. It's beautiful. The writing is smooth and fluid and powerful, and it's also a great movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a great thriller. It's really gruesome and wonderful. Which I think would appeal to you because I know you do a lot of true crime.
Yeah.
And serial killers, and some serial killers in there.
Yeah, cults. I do all the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so if you haven't read Headhunters or haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. Both of them.
I was going to say, now you've got the Nick Hoffman mystery series, the 9th book out now. How do you come together in writing a series like that? Because it's fictional, right? So you've created Nick Hoffman. Where do you get your characters from, and how do you put them together?
I was talking to my editor at St. Martin's Press. He had published a book of short stories of mine, and I'm the son of Holocaust survivors, so these stories were pretty serious. He said, you have a good sense of humor. You should write something funny. And I was thinking, like, what? And he said, well, maybe like a screwball comedy or something like that. Well, I love watching screwball comedies, but I didn't think I had that at that time. I didn't think I had the timing to do it. I mean, there are a lot of things I didn't think I would be able to do back then that I've over time come to realize, okay, now I know enough how to write X, Y, or Z. That's what's great about being a writer. Hopefully you get better as you write more and you read more, and you're out in the world and you're talking to other writers. And I was casting around for an idea, and I had a short story about 2 guys who teach at a university, and the ex of one of them comes into their lives, and they have dinner, and it's kind of a mess. And someone said, I remember someone at a reading, I think, said to me, I don't like the way that story ended. The guest should have been killed. Should have been poisoned at dinner. And and sometimes people say really helpful things at readings or in reviews, and I thought, that's a really good idea. I wish I had done that. And when my editors, chimed in, recommended a mystery series, I thought, well, why don't I take those 2 characters? I already have the academic setting, and let's see what I can do with that. They're both from New York. They're really not like the typical Midwesterner in this town that I've created, Michiganapolis, which is kind of an amalgam of East Lansing and Lansing and other towns locally. So that's where the setting comes from. Somewhere in the series, I think in the 4th or 5th book, I bring in a professor of Canadian studies named Juno Dromgoole, and she is foul-mouthed, and she's kind of a combination of Tina Turner and Bette Midler. And she is the exact opposite of our cliche of Canadians. She's not polite, she's not quiet, she's loud and boisterous and curses a lot and causes a lot of trouble in this English department. And she was suggested by a number of different people I saw at a conference, actually 3 different women. And I said, the way that woman dresses is really interesting. And then the way that woman talks is really interesting. And then the way that woman interacts with people is really interesting. There were 3 different women, and I thought, I could take those traits, work with them, and create one character. So a lot of the characters are might start with something physical, some physical trait, or be based on what somebody looks like, someone I've met, and then they just become. That is a magnet for other characteristics. So nobody is directly, nobody enters that series from real life. I mean, people have said to me, "Oh, I recognize so and so in your third mystery," and I said, "Well, you're wrong. That's not true, because she's not in there. I would know because I wrote the book."
No.
Yeah, but So. Well, Ian Rankin said that. The Scots crime writer. He said his father. I remember I was moderating a panel at, I think, BoucherCon, and the mystery conference, and his father said, that character is me. And he said, "Dad, she's a nun." And he said, "I know your tricks. That's me. You've disguised me."
Well, you never know what he was doing.
And that actually is something that I have done. Sometimes I have to use a real person as a character. If I really like who they are, I will change their gender, and that gives me freedom to work with them. But I learned that in writing short stories too. Is to take experiences and shift them. And I got in a conversation once with someone who said, I read a really good friend. I read that story, and I remember that incident. And I said, "No, you're remembering it wrong." She said, "No, I remember it happening exactly like that." I said, "No, it happened in the winter, and I switched it to the summer." And she said, "No, I'm sure it happened in the summer." I said, "No, I moved it so that I could have freedom to play around with it. I wouldn't feel bound by the facts." And that's what I tell my students in creative writing. And I also teach online at writewithoutborders.com. And, I tell people to feel free to switch things around in fiction. And
well, it changes the perspective as well. Like if you change a character from a male to a female, it's going to change perspective because you're looking at it from a different person.
Absolutely, and that person has a whole different view of the world and is viewed differently by the world and walks through the world in a different way, literally and metaphorically. So, yeah, absolutely. So my characters just come from all over, and sometimes I'll see somebody in a hotel or a restaurant or on a bus or a train or whatever, and I'll think, and I'll just be really taken by something about them, by their manner, or maybe the way they're speaking on the phone, or whatever. And I'll just make some notes, and usually they'll end up being so cryptic that I'll find them days later, and I'm not sure quite what they mean. But if I get to my iPad or my PC quickly enough, then I will. Then I'll jot it down and I'll save it for something, for some book somewhere. Or it's just gotten me thinking. That's what I tell student writers, is that nothing you write is ever wasted. Because it's always teaching you something.
Yeah, you learn as you go, always.
Absolutely.
And now with this fiction series, with the Nick Hoffman series, what do you want people to get out of it when they read? So if I was to pick up a couple of them and I'm reading them, do you have some sort of meaning or underlying thought that you want people to walk away with?
Not really. They're written as satires of the academic world, which is kind of pretty goofy to begin with. It's a world with lots of high-flown rhetoric about a community of knowledge and serving students and reaching out to to the surrounding population in the town or whatever, and we support diversity and equality and et cetera, and a lot of times what's underneath the surface is pretty vicious. Borges called it bald men arguing over a comb. And so, no offense to anyone out there, including Jason Statham if he's listening, because he looks really good. We were talking about him before the show, and so it's a satire. So I hope people enjoy entering a world that is that's a closed world, that is really goofy and has its own very strange rules and ways of behavior, and it's kind of like taking a safari without having to go very far. So they're written. That's part of why they're written, and they're also they're written as mysteries, and I hope mystery crime fiction fans will enjoy following the mystery, discovering the corpse along with Nick Hoffman, and finding out who did it and why. All those things appeal to me. I read my first mysteries, it was probably Agatha Christie, in junior high, and I fell in love with the form. I just loved the idea of things getting resolved at the end. Although I've written some mysteries. Some of the books in the series were a little open-ended, but not every mystery does resolve 100% at the end. But I just fell in love with Agatha Christie and just started reading her and anyone else I could find in the genre, and so I hope people will enjoy the books as satires of academia, but also as mysteries. As far as underlying thoughts, there's some social criticism in the book, and cultural commentary, but that's not really the main. That's not really the main thrust of what I'm doing in the books. I hope people will have fun. I had fun writing them, and I hope people have fun reading them. That's really my main goal, is that to be entertaining.
Yeah, but you don't always put a happy ending in there.
Well, what does Oscar Wilde say? The good end happily and the bad unhappily. That is what fiction means, Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. You find out who the murderer is. I mean, that's important. In one book, the murderer gets away for a very specific reason. So I won't say which one it is. I was playing around with form, and I thought, this would be really interesting to.
How did readers react to that, or were you pleased with how it turned out?
I was pleased with how it turned out. I didn't get any adverse criticism about it at all. I've been lucky. I've had really good reviews with the series. The series is actually what made one of my dreams come true. It got me reviewed in the New York Times, and that was an amazing experience. My second book in the series, The Edith Wharton Murders, about which is Nick Hoffman has to corral two rival literary societies into one conference, and they hate each other for complex reasons. But and of course, somebody gets killed in the middle of it, and I got a rave review in the New York Times, a book review, and that really launched the series. I was glad it was the second book because it's better than the first. In the first one, I was feeling my way in the form, but in the second one, I really felt like I knew what I was doing. He said. I mean, there'll always be someone who say, well, I think you got X, Y, or Z.
Do you go back then and reread your books or look back at them and
Never.
kind of go, oh, no,
never.
Just walk away?
Never.
Away.
I've never. I only read. I don't reread anything. I do readings from books depending on what people would like me to do. So, like, my 19th book is a memoir called My Germany, and it's about the role that Germany has played in my life and my family's life, both the real Germany and the Germany I imagined. And I did about 50 or 60 readings from that book in the U.S., Canada, and across Germany. And so I read parts of that book many times. I've never read the book from the beginning to the end once I was done with it. I didn't have to. I felt like I had lived the book, but the sections that I read that worked really well at readings, I knew those by heart practically, which was very cool because I could ad-lib. That's a funny thing. A reading, I had some experience as a theater major, double major in theater and English for a while in college. So I was really comfortable being, on stage doing readings, and I would improvise, because what the text as it's on the page doesn't always work smoothly when you're reading it aloud, and more than just having to add a he said or a she said so it's clear who's speaking. Sometimes a sentence might be a little long, and it would work better if you split it in two for whatever reason. But occasionally I'd be doing a reading, and there'd be someone who come up after me afterwards and say to me, well, I was looking at the book while you were reading, and you changed things. That made me laugh because I thought, well, I'm the writer. Don't I get to change things if I want to? So I've changed them in that sense and gone back and changed them in the moment, but I haven't gone back and rewritten anything. I'm trying to think, have I? I don't know. I don't think so. See, that's the other thing. After 26 books, someone will mention something like in one of my stories, and it might have appeared in a magazine in 1986 or 7 or 8, and for them it's fresh because they've just read it. I don't remember what's in it. I mean, honestly, I'd have to look at it. Even going over the, seeing a book through publication, if I haven't looked at it in a while, I'll forget certain scenes, which is good, because then I can look at them with a fresh eye.
Now, you seem to have been affected a lot by the Holocaust and that whole series of tragedies. So, with the world the way it is today, there's a lot of question into the Holocaust. How do you react to stuff like that?
Oh, you mean people who deny the Holocaust?
Yeah.
I've never met anyone personally who denies the Holocaust. I just think I like what Deborah Lipstadt, who took a Holocaust denier to court in England and won.
Right. Yeah.
It's as crazy as saying African Americans were happy in slavery. That's what I say. I immediately compare it to the two when people ask me about that. I say, that's a lie. We know it's a lie. We have plenty of evidence that it's a lie. African Americans were not happy as slaves. They were brutally mistreated in horrific ways, and we have the evidence, and we have the evidence that the Holocaust happened. And people who deny both of those realities have an agenda, which is pretty ugly.
Yeah, it's pretty weird the way the world's going. And
isn't it always?
Yeah.
So? I mean, someone probably, back in Babylon, 3,500 years ago, said, "God, the world is really strange these days." So many
kids.
locusts. I don't remember there being so many locusts. My grandfather said we didn't used to have this many locusts. What's going on?
Yeah.
Except then they would have said the gods are angry, right? I mean, they would have had an answer to it.
Same now, right?
Yeah, maybe.
Doesn't change much. I don't. It's kind of crazy. So now you've also. I was going to say actually when we were talking about the world today. So does this COVID-19 and the whole, strange pandemic thing that's happened to us all, does that sort of affect you in your writing?
I am waiting to see. There's a wonderful line in a Tennessee Williams play. It's an early version of Summer and Smoke, where the main character, Alma, is someone is coming to see her, a gentleman caller, and she doesn't want to see him. And her mother says, "What shall I tell him?" And she says, "Tell him I've changed and I'm waiting to see in what way." It's a really simple line, but it's very powerful. And I know that this experience of a worldwide pandemic is changing me. I know that being in quarantine, even though even though I'm not suffering the way many people are, I know it's changing me. I don't know how yet. I haven't felt the urge to write about it in any way. So I don't know. The thing is, with all writers, and everyone who's out there who's a writer knows that things that happen to you are like dropping a stone in a well, and you hear the splash, but it comes from a long distance away, and it takes time. Now there are people who respond instantly, to whatever experience, a hurricane or a war, but I'm not like that, and I know a lot of my writer friends aren't like that either. They're just kind of waiting to see what their imagination will offer up. That's where I'm at. But I also have a novel that is 200 pages long that I am waiting to get my mojo back for. So once things settle down one way or another with the pandemic, I think I'll be able to go back to that novel. Now, it's possible that COVID-19 will change what happens in that book. I don't know. I could set it in the middle of the pandemic. I don't know. I might move it up in time.
I always just think when there's a lot of kind of darkness or sort of negativity going on, like every day you turn on the TV or if you hear about it, there's, the protests and then you've got the pandemic and all that. If it makes you feel darker, and would that come out in your writing? Would you write it from more of a dark or negative angle?
I don't think so. I think, we've had a pretty strange couple, 3+ years since Obama was president, and that's inspired me to write 2 comic mysteries. So I went in the other direction. I mean, the darkness made me write satire.
Huh.
And the satire of the administrators in my recently published book, State University of Murder, there people will see some similarities with politicians there. So there's some subtle and maybe not so subtle connections to the current political scene there, undercurrents, call them what you will. References, nothing really overt, but that was my response. My response to darkness is to write something lighter. Right now, I don't know what I will be writing a year or 2 from now. I never thought I'd write a historical novel. I did. Rosedale and Love, set in, the Gilded Age. I honestly never thought I'd write a mystery series until the idea came to me out of talking to my my editor. There are a lot of things I never thought I'd be writing. One of the books is actually Assault with a Deadly Lie in the series is actually written more as a novel of suspense. I never thought I would be able to do that. I never thought I'd have the timing right for a novel of suspense. And that starts with a real bang. And, and was a nominee for a Midwest Book Award. And so I was really pleased that it got that kind of recognition. And, so I don't know what I'll be writing next. I mean, I can't predict. I do know I won't be writing the same thing as I've written just before. That I can promise you, because I'd be bored. I get bored really easily.
Well, and the Vampire of Gotham, how did that come about?
Well, it's kind of a spin-off of Rosedale and Love. Edith Wharton's a writer that I really loved and really influenced me early on, partly because I grew up in New York, and so did she, and there were a lot of ways that I knew pieces of her, the New York that she knew. And so I wrote, The House of Mirth is probably her most famous book, and the bestseller in 1905, and one of the characters in there is Jewish, and she has a fairly negative portrayal of him, which is typical of that period in her class. So I was inspired by books like White Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys that plays with Wuthering Heights. No, it's not Wuthering Heights. It's one of the other Bronte novels, and Jane Eyre. Sorry, and looks at the life of the wife who is locked up in the attic, and I just kind of, or Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, which takes two minor characters and makes them the center of a play in which Hamlet is a minor character. So I just wrote a novel where Lily Barth, the heroine of the book, is a secondary character, and the Jewish character and his family are the main characters, and that was a lot of fun to do. And then I just kind of did my own spin-off. I thought, what if he was a vampire? Then wouldn't that be interesting? So I just did a novella, and I made it really erotic. It starts with him in a bordello with a French prostitute. So, and that's another thing I never thought I'd write. I never thought I would write erotica. So that was a twofer. I got to boldly go where Lev Raphael had never gone before. I wrote horror, and I wrote erotica, and I loved it, and I'm kind of working on a sequel. So that was, so again, people say, well, would you write a romance? I said, well, I don't know, maybe, if I had the right story, and if I had the right characters, maybe I would. I don't think I'd write a Western. I enjoy watching them. I don't know if that's a genre that I know well enough to write. I have read romances. I haven't read enough Westerns. So, but who can say? That's a great thing about a writing career. That's a great thing, and that's the downfall or the downside. It's totally unexpected. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, and that could be good or that can be bad. I remember one Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, an editor called and said she was dropping a handful of books, and mine was one of them. And it was right before Thanksgiving. Isn't that great? I said, why did you call me now? And she said, well, I didn't want to hold on to this through the holidays. Thank you so much. I'm glad you're going to have a Merry Christmas, too. Wonderful. And so I was really not into turkey and mashed potatoes that year. But then, I was recently invited to, because of all my work, was recently invited to teach in Germany for 4 months. I mean, so, and that came out of the blue. So a writing career is really crazy. And that's also something I tell student writers at whatever stage of student of their lives they're in, that if you really go into this and make this your life, make it a career, it is a roller coaster ride.
Hey Lev, we've asked this of a number of other writers as well that have come on. I mean, what other advice would you give someone just getting started in 2020 when publishing looks really different than it used to, or about the craft? What do you tell your students, like when they're just getting started in the program that you teach in?
Well, I would tell them, if you find a reader you admire, read everything she has written, every damn word, everything. I read it more than once. Study, both for reading for pleasure, but also study what that writer does that you admire, and not to copy it, but to learn from it, and as a model going forward. I also tell student writers, read variously, read in different genres. I don't read in as many genres as I used to, but I mean, I look around my library. I have a section of biography, and a section of psychology, and a section of history, and a section of American literature, and a section of literature and translation, and a section on the Holocaust, and a section of Judaica, and a section on Christianity, because I was thinking early Christianity, because I was thinking of doing a novel in the time of Jesus, which I still haven't figured out, but we'll see if that ever flies. So read widely, read wisely, and find the people who you think can give you the best advice. Like if you're in a writing program or in a college, if you can find a mentor, that's great. If you're in a writing group, be really careful, because sometimes those can be not supportive. If you are serious about writing, a writing program is not a bad idea, because it's like becoming entering a monastery in a way. You dedicate yourself really intensely to your craft. I think that's one way to learn your craft. I think for some people, I would say if you can find, some people are really good at this, at finding a niche where they can become really big on Instagram or TikTok or any of the other platforms. That is often a way to get a publishing contract now. So there are lots of different ways to both to get into publishing, and there are many ways to educate yourself. I think good writers that I've met are widely read. I think that's really important, is to read, because that's how you learn what good writing is, and that's how you learn all the different pieces of writing. How to construct a story, how to build characters, how to create a scene, how to move people around in a scene, how to do good dialogue. And you can't just create it out of your own head or just from watching television.
Okay.
Although I do watch a lot, I confess I do watch a lot of television, and I am, especially crime series. I'm really fascinated in seeing how other people do their mysteries and create their characters, and it also teaches me what cliches to avoid. One of the big cliches that I've been noticing for a while now is whatever the sleuth is, he or she has a screwed up teenage kid.
Oh.
I see this everywhere. I see this in books. I see this on TV. I see this in movies. And once one of my editors said, what if your main character adopts, or what if he discovers he actually has a kid and a teenage kid shows up at his door? And I said, no friggin' way. I am not going down that route. I've seen other people do it way too often. I'm not going to do that. That's as bad as all those movies that end with the line, "Let's go home."
Yeah. Do you think those kind of writers are just because they're writing such mass amounts of writing, like for television and stuff, and Netflix nowadays, that maybe they're just grabbing formulas, just putting it together?
Oh, absolutely. And I would say especially any show where they're constantly dropping the F-bomb. I have absolutely nothing against obscenity in dialogue, but if I hear the F-bomb dropped every other word by every other character, I think, well, that's really lazy writing, because you don't have to write that many words. If you just, and I actually, I kind of said this to one mystery writer when I was the crime fiction reviewer at the Detroit Free Press. I said, we were at the bar, and with a bunch of other writers, and I said, your second book, you used a lot of obscenity that you didn't use in the first one. And he said, yeah, no one else noticed it but you. But he was sorry that he had done it. He said it wasn't as strong as his first book, and he knew it. And I think it was sophomore jitters, and he was probably cursing as he was writing. He was probably thinking, F this and F that. There's always a lot of pressure writing, and that's and hopefully the other thing I tell writers, and I think the main thing I tell writers is don't buy into you must write this way, or even you must write every day. I think that's really damaging to people who can't write every day or don't feel like writing every day, I tell people, see if you can discover how and when you write the best. What is your method? What really works for you? That's really hard. That's really hard to find that. A lot of people say, use the cliche, writers have to find their voice. Before they even find their voice, I think they have to find their method. They have to find how to write, what the best conditions are for them in which to write, and how to create their own world before they even know what their voice is. That comes later.
I said that. You see, Greg and Julie were laughing at me before. I go away. I can't write at home. I can get a lot of evidence together and do a lot of work, but I need to go somewhere else because it just doesn't work at home, and I know that. So I always leave. And I love going to cities that I haven't been to before. I love being in a hotel in a city downtown where there's a lot of people, and it gives me a certain kind of feeling or atmosphere that comes with that puts me in the mood to do what I need to do.
That's terrific. That's great. I might use and give that to a character. I like the idea of that.
There's a certain isolation you get when you're surrounded by a million people that you do not know, and they're going about their life as if it's normal, and because you're not really noticed. So when you're in amongst that group, you kind of almost see a whole little world going on, and that always puts me in the mood to be able to finish, put out the storyline that goes with the book, because the book it's all true and it's all the stuff, the evidence, but
you have to construct
you have to put a voice
together.
Yeah.
Well,
you have to put it together.
And hotels are wonderful for concentration. I can do reviews in hotels. I can do a review or a blog in a hotel. I can write something short, and I often take notes when I'm on the road. I don't work long scenes, partly or really work intensely on the book, partly just to give myself a break. I mean, if I'm on a book tour, that's a lot of work as it is. But I can work on short pieces when I'm on the road, and I get what you're saying, because I really like that sense of I am so far away from my normal world and everything in it. And the play, no matter how nice the hotel room is, it's stripped of everything that's yours, unless you bring all your crap with you in a separate.
Yeah, no, leave it all home, except for my little computer and all that stuff. But no, everything stays home.
I love it. Yeah. That's great. That's a great image.
Well, there you go, and make your character a woman. A nun.
A nun.
A Canadian nun.
I'm a Canadian nun.
There you go.
Yeah, that'll be some very interesting research. I actually know some priests, and I've met a nun. I can start doing research right now.
Oh, there you go. You see? You need an idea, come to me.
Absolutely. 1-800-IDEAS, is that it?
Yeah, 1-800. Yeah, I've got apps for everything. So, well, hey, listen, we're running out of time. I want to make sure you give out your website. So, the website and anywhere you want people to contact you.
Well, my website is levraphael.com, and there's a contact page, and you can contact me via that and ask me anything about my books or about writing. I'm happy to chat. And I teach individualized workshops and mentor at writewithoutborders.com, and there's a whole range of things that I do there, and I also edit manuscripts, so of all kinds. So I work across genres. So or you can find me on Facebook or Twitter. Those are the only two platforms I do. I had to ration social media because it could take over your life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I agree totally. You know, Twitter, even Twitter, I'm kind of weak on myself. You know, Grindr's more.
And Grindr has a much more appealing name than Twitter. I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Better picture.
Right, and wouldn't you rather grind than tweet? I mean, honestly, I think we all would.
Well, yeah, it works. It works for me.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
Oh,
Lev.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. You guys have a great day.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me? Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.